The rain hammered the pavement like fists on a coffin lid, and I stood there in the downpour, soaked to the bone, my phone slipping from my trembling fingers as I smashed the Uber app icon for the third time that night. "Fuck you, Tyler," I whispered to the empty street, the words tasting like bile after he'd slammed the door on our 5-year shitshow of a relationship, screaming that I was too broken for this city. That's when the headlights cut through the storm, a black SUV pulling up like a lifeline from hell, and as the window rolled down, revealing a stranger with eyes like cracked sapphires, I knew this ride was going to unravel me. His name was Axel, he said, voice gravelly over the thunder, like he'd smoked one too many packs chasing ghosts across the Pacific Northwest. I slid into the passenger seat, dripping Seattle's relentless autumn misery onto the floor mats, and muttered my address in Capitol Hill, the neighborhood that suddenly felt like a cage I'd clawed my way out of. "Rough night?" he asked, glancing over with a half-smile that didn't reach those eyes, and I laughed. A sharp, ugly bark that echoed in the cab like a gunshot. We didn't talk much at first. The wipers slapped rhythmically against the windshield, smearing the neon glow of Pike Street's bars and coffee shops into abstract smears of red and blue. I was Elliot, 28, a barista by day and a dreamer by night, sketching half-finished graphic novels in the margins of my life, always chasing the next plot twist that never came. Tyler had been my anchor, or so I thought, until he confessed he'd been sleeping with his coworker for months, packing his bags while I was out buying groceries. "You're just too intense," he'd said, like my love was a flaw in the code. Now here I was, fleeing the apartment we'd shared, with nothing but a duffel bag crammed with clothes and the sketchpad that held every doodle of us I'd ever drawn. Axel shifted gears as we merged onto I-5, the highway a river of taillights stretching south toward my sister's place in Tacoma. He was older, mid-30s maybe, with forearms roped in faded tattoos. Anchors and swallows, the kind sailors get to remind themselves of ports left behind. His flannel shirt clung damply to his broad shoulders, and there was a faint scent of pine and motor oil that cut through the rain's metallic tang. "You look like you could use a detour," he said finally, his voice low, like he was testing waters deeper than the Puget Sound. I turned, surprised. "What? Like a scenic route through hell?" He chuckled, a rumble that vibrated through the seat, and for the first time that night, the knot in my chest loosened just a fraction. We started small. Weather, the Mariners' latest collapse, how Seattle's clouds could suffocate a man if he let them. But Axel had a way of peeling back layers, casual questions laced with something sharper, like he was reading the fine print on my soul. "What's the heaviest thing you're carrying tonight?" he asked, eyes flicking to the rearview as a semi roared past. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Tyler's betrayal, the way he'd gaslit me into thinking my queerness was the problem, not his wandering dick. How I'd grown up in a trailer park outside Spokane, Dad's Bible-thumping rants about sodomites, echoing long after he drank himself into the grave. Mom too buried in her diner shifts to notice her son sketching boys instead of trucks. "I thought he was it," I admitted, voice cracking. "The guy who'd stick around for the messy parts." Axel nodded, jaw tightening, but he didn't interrupt. Instead, he pulled off at the next exit, toward Alki Beach, the dark expanse of Elliott Bay glittering under the storm's fringe like shattered glass. We parked facing the water, engine idling against the chill, waves crashing like accusations. That's when Axel opened up, his story spilling out in fragments as jagged as the Olympics silhouetted on the horizon. Born in a nowhere town in Montana, he joined the Marines right out of high school, chasing structure in the chaos of don't ask, don't tell. Fell hard for a fellow grunt named Reyes during a deployment in Afghanistan. Stolen nights in the barracks, promises whispered over MREs. But back stateside, Reyes bailed, couldn't handle the civilian world's prying eyes, left Axel with a purple heart scar on his thigh and a heart full of shrapnel. "Betrayal's a bitch," Axel said, staring out at the fairy lights bobbing like lost souls. "It don't just cut. It poisons everything after." In that moment, with the rain drumming a frantic tattoo on the roof, something shifted. His hand brushed mine on the console. Not grabbing, just resting there, calluses rough against my knuckles. And I felt seen not as Elliot the fuck-up, but as Elliot the survivor. We talked for hours, the storm easing into a drizzle as dawn crept in gray and unforgiving. He shared stories of hitchhiking cross-country after the discharge, landing in Seattle as an Uber driver because driving's the only way I know to keep moving without braking. I confessed my dream of publishing that graphic novel, a tale of two outcasts finding home in each other, inspired by half-remembered crushes from my closeted teens. By the time we hit Tacoma, the sun was a weak smear on the horizon, and I'd spilled more than I'd planned. Fears of never trusting again. The ache of loving in a world that still side-eyed two guys holding hands. Axel pulled up to my sister's curb, the engine's hum fading into silence. "You deserve more than a ride, Elliot," he said, turning to face me fully, those blue eyes holding mine like a vow. "Someone who'll pull over in the storm, not drive you into it." My breath caught, and before I could overthink it, I leaned in, our lips meeting soft and tentative, tasting of salt and second chances. It wasn't fireworks. It was a quiet ignition, the kind that warms from the inside out. For the next few weeks, it was a whirlwind I hadn't known I needed. Axel became my constant. Late-night pickups after closing shifts at the cafe, drives up to Mount Rainier where we'd hike trails slick with mist, sharing silences that spoke louder than words. He'd text me sketches of routes he'd mapped out, doodles of coffee cups labeled Elliot's Elixir, and I'd fire back pages from my novel, him reading aloud in that gravel voice while I sketched his profile against the dashboard glow. We were careful at first. No labels, just us against the city's pulse. But it deepened, roots twisting into soil I'd thought barren. He met my sister, Lena, over takeout tamales, her eyeing him like a hawk until he fixed her leaky faucet with a wink and a toolbox from his trunk. "He's solid," she whispered later, hugging me tight. "Don't fuck it up by running." But Seattle has a way of dredging up the past like driftwood on the tide. It started with a voicemail I found on Axel's phone one afternoon, left charging while he showered after a muddy off-road detour we'd taken. I wasn't snooping. Okay, maybe a little, but the name Reyes lit up the screen like a flare. Curiosity bit and I hit play. "Ax, it's me. I'm in town. We need to talk about us, about what I owe you. Call me." My stomach dropped, the shower's hum suddenly deafening. When he emerged, towel slung low, I held up the phone, voice steady as rebar. "Who's Reyes, Axel? And don't bullshit me." His face crumpled, the easy grin vanishing like smoke. He sank onto the bed, rubbing his scar through the towel, and the story poured out. Not the sanitized version from Alki Beach, but the raw underbelly. Reyes hadn't just left. He'd outed Axel to his family during a drunken fight, torched his bridges back home, then ghosted him for a normal life with a wife and kids in Boise. Axel had tracked him down once, years ago, begging for closure, only for Reyes to slip a wad of cash into his hand like hush money. Said it was for the inconvenience. Axel spat, eyes glistening. "I kept driving, but it eats at you, man. Makes you wonder if you're worth sticking around for." Betrayal's echo, I thought, Tyler's ghost laughing in the wings. But this was different. Axel wasn't hiding. He was handing me the knife, waiting for the twist. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I demanded, pacing the cramped apartment, heart hammering like the rain that night. "Because I was scared," he admitted, voice breaking. "Scared you'd see me as the guy who gets left, not the one who stays." We argued then, words flying like shrapnel. Me accusing him of half-truths, him firing back that my walls were chain-link fences. I stormed out, hailing another Uber to Lena's, the irony bitter as black coffee. The climax hit 2 days later, a Friday night swallowed by fog rolling off the sound. I'd ignored his texts, buried myself in sketches of fractured heroes, but guilt gnawed like termites. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Not Axel, but Lena. "Elliot, get down here. It's Axel. He's in trouble." My blood turned to ice. I bolted to my car, tires screeching through the mist-shrouded streets toward the docks, where she'd said he'd been working a side gig hauling gear for a fishing charter. By the time I arrived, blue and red lights pulsed like a migraine, cop cars cordoning off Pier 52. Axel stood against his SUV, wrists cuffed, face bruised and streaked with blood from a split lip. Reyes, taller than I'd imagined, with the hollow eyes of a man who'd sold his soul, was being loaded into an ambulance, ranting about a dispute turned violent. Turns out Axel had gone to meet him, not for reconciliation, but to end it clean. Return the cash, walk away. But Reyes, drunk and desperate, had swung first, pulling a knife in a haze of regret and rage. Axel disarmed him, Marine's training kicking in, but not before the blade grazed his arm, and a bystander called the cops. Assault with a deadly? One officer muttered, but Axel just locked eyes with me over the chaos, whispering, I couldn't let him poison this too. The cops uncuffed him after statements, Reyes Priors painting him as the aggressor, but the damage was done. Axel's arm stitched up in the ER, his trust in himself frayed like old rope. I waited in the sterile hallway, the fluorescent buzz mocking my regret, until he emerged, bandaged and hollow-eyed. You came, he said simply, and I pulled him into a hug, the scent of antiseptic mingling with pine. Of course I did. We're in this storm together. We drove back in silence, my hand on his good knee, the city unfolding like a forgiveness. No grand gestures, just the quiet humanism of two men who'd been cracked open and pieced back, scars and all. Axel moved into my place a month later, his toolbox next to my sketchpad. Our drives now detours to future, not escapes from past. I finished the novel, dedicated to the Uber driver who offered more than transportation. A map to home in another man's eyes. Betrayal had carved us hollow, but love? It filled the spaces with something unbreakable. American as apple pie and endless highways. Flawed, fierce, and free.